Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we watch the Sunday morning news show so that you do not have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Thanks so much for being here. Great to start the week with you. Our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. Stay tuned for the end of the show, and I'm going to plug some upcoming events that I'm doing on the European continent in Oslo and Wales. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up at the end of the show. Very excited.
I'm excited, yeah. And that's a reminder, Aaron, people are demanding a Useful Idiots live show. We'll talk about that behind the scenes, but I'm putting you on notice to hold you accountable and get the whole Useful Idiots audience to help me bully you into it. Peer pressure.
Well, listen, I mean, let's have this convo out loud. I mean, the live podcast format, for me, a podcast is about it's what you put on when you're walking, you're doing errands. So all the things you can go see in person, a concert, a movie, a talk, a political talk. Does the podcast is the podcast worth the seat? Is it worth someone's evening? The live podcast. I've never been sold on it, but
have you ever attended one?
I have, and I found it really boring, to be honest with you.
Really? All right. Behind the scenes, I'll ask you which ones it is because yeah.
Okay. But I'd love to hear in the chat.
Yeah. Let us know, guys.
Live podcast event. I mean, because
Yeah, would you come? And we could do it like a fundraiser.
That we could do.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of fundraising, that's what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Yeah. As people know, Aaron mentioned this amazing event that Gabor Maté and Chris Hedges did in New York City. And what they did is they turned it into a fundraiser for Mecca, Middle Eastern Children's Alliance. And so Wilson, being the amazing person that he is, decided, hey, we have an audience. We can fundraise, and we are doing the same thing. And we've made, I believe, over $5,000 for this great organization, which does really important work in Gaza and in Palestine and neighboring areas. So, and that link is still active. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone who's supported so far. We've raised almost $5,000 and I'm very grateful to everyone who's pitched in. And you can't pitch in, no worries. We're glad you're here. And don't forget to also like this stream and send us positive vibes.
And here is Cindy Bagby saying, yes, please do a live podcast show.
Okay, there we go.
That means 100% of our voters have decided, yes, have endorsed it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's get to our Sunday show recap. So we're skipping Meet the Depressed this week, right?
Because there's just nothing there because they did. Yeah, there wasn't anything there.
All right, well, let's turn to Gaza. It's hard to put into words. It's impossible to put into words how horrific it is right now. Some of the latest atrocities, and again, we can't keep track of all of them because there's so many. Israel attacked the Indonesian hospital. It attacked people as they were fleeing the Indonesian hospital. Israel also attacked another hospital that is specifically serving people with who are amputees. So it's the Hamad Hospital for Rehabilitation and Prosthetics. Israel attacked that hospital as well. So that's at least 2 hospital attacks by Israel in recent days, on top of all the regular routine massacres that are occurring, people dying by the hundreds every single day in these Israeli attacks with full U.S. support, alongside the current starvation siege, which the Netanyahu government had just announced they're going to let in a bit of food into Gaza, just a little bit, to avoid a full-blown famine. So that's the Israeli government responding to criticism of it imposing a starvation siege of Gaza, is allowing in a token amount of food and claiming they will allow in a token.
Right. Who knows? Right. And it's just a good time to remember that, remember, Israel and all of its defenders claim that Israel does not bomb hospitals. Remember at the beginning of this when they said that they didn't do that? And now, of course, now it's an issue of, Hamas was in there. I mean, they just lie and lie and lie, but it's just shameful. Everyone who said that Israel would never bomb a hospital should apologize or know that they were lying or totally incorrect. And so there is no bottom, like you said, Aaron. Like, it's just, there's nothing they won't do, it seems like.
No, because they have a full impunity from the Trump administration. And there was an effort in recent days by people in the Trump camp to pretend as if there's some sort of rift between Trump and Netanyahu. But there's not. And in fact, we're going to see very clearly from today's clips that there's not, because Steve Witkoff, who was Trump's envoy for so many things, including brokering an end to the Gaza war, which Steve Witkoff has been pretending to do, but really not. He recently brokered, for example, the release of Israeli-American soldier Adon Alexander, who was captured by Hamas on October 7th. And reportedly, Steve Witkoff promised Hamas that in exchange for Adon Alexander's release, that Trump would call for an end to the siege of Gaza and for negotiations into a ceasefire, which the U.S. completely ignored, flouted. So that's the accusation for Hamas, that basically Witkoff played them and completely offered something that he did not fulfill at all. And so now we're in the midst of just ongoing massacres. And Steve Witkoff was on ABC's This Week, and he was asked about the current situation in Gaza.
And another thing that the president said on this trip, he was very direct in his statement about the people of Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, who he said are starving, and about getting aid and support. We have to help the Palestinians, he said. Is the president, are you pushing the Israelis to allow that aid to come in and to hold back on some of the offensive operations that continue to be ongoing in Gaza?
That's not the question. He knows they're not doing that. So the question is, are you pressuring Israel to allow an aid? The question should be, why aren't you demanding Israel let in food that it's blocking and cease its attacks? So he's just like, he's creating this impression that it's an open question as to whether or not Israel is full impunity. But as Steve Witkoff is going to basically make very clear, Israel does have the full blessing of the Trump administration to commit mass murder and a starvation siege. And they're not even bothering to pretend otherwise.
Right. And it's also a good example of how complicit the media is, right? I mean, Carl is basically repeating Israeli talking points that you don't really have to be an expert in Israeli policy to know that they won't be doing what they're saying. And so he's just acting as a stenographer through the very premise of the question.
The president, John, is a humanitarian. And I think that everyone is concerned about the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. That said, it is a very complicated situation there. Logistically, I don't
Why is
think
it
there's any
complicated? Why is it complicated logistically? Because they're not letting in aid. I mean, because the starvation siege, but even within this terrible, not humanitarian situation that they've created. I mean, it's almost ridiculous to talk about it in this context because they're the ones who are creating this. But even, let's just say for argument's sake that they wanted to help them right now, you don't block trucks of aid.
Yeah, and according to the UN, it's not complicated at all. They have hundreds of trucks waiting to get in. They have a plan to distribute the aid. So there's nothing, all this talk about logistics, complications. No, what the U.S. is trying to do is create a new mechanism controlled by the U.S., run by, spooks and U.S. military veterans and just shady actors tied to the U.S. to take over Gaza aid so that they can control it and actually further Israel's agenda of depriving the people of Gaza of the basics that they need to live, to replace the UN. And they hate the UN because the UN keeps Palestinians alive and keeps keeps the population inside of Gaza, which is against Israel's goal of ethnic cleansing. So saying it's complicated when the issue is only a starvation siege, there's nothing complicated about that whatsoever. It's nothing logistical to work out there. The only logistics is picking up the phone and calling Netanyahu and telling him, stop doing this, but they won't do that.
That's really upsetting. And by the way, it's fascinating, or not fascinating, but it really gives away the game. Smotrich actually admitted that what will come in the coming days, speaking of aid, what will come in the coming days is very little.
Yeah, of course.
And they're just doing this to cover their asses, right? Because Smotrich also said, if we continue like this, the world will force us to stop the war.
Exactly. So he's admitting it's just token window dressing.
PR stunt, exactly.
To be able to continue carrying out mass murder. All right, let's try to get through this Witkoff clip. It's any talk of Gaza today will be impossible to not stop every 2 seconds, because it's just lie after lie after lie.
Between President Trump's position and Prime Minister Netanyahu's position.
Wait, let's rewind that. Sorry, because that's a very important thing that he said. Hold on.
Very complicated situation there. Logistically, I don't think there's any daylight between President Trump's position and Prime Minister Netanyahu's position. The issue now is, how do we logistically get all of those trucks?
So there's no daylight between Trump and the Israeli prime minister who is imposing a starvation siege on Gaza. That's what Steve Witkoff just admitted. How can you call it complicated and challenging when you're admitting that you're fully on board with the Israeli policy of the starvation siege?
Right.
It's basically an admission. He's basically admitting to like being complicit in a war crime. There's no daylight between us and the leader of the country imposing a starvation siege of a defenseless death camp. That's what Steve Witkoff has admitted. And
right. And Trump, and Trump himself has said the people in Gaza are starving.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
He's saying the people in Gaza are starving, and Witkoff, his envoy, is saying that there's no daylight between us and the people who are starving, the people of Gaza.
Into Gaza, how do we set up the aid stations? There are many initiatives that we're working on to address this. There are going to be mobile kitchens that are going to be sent in there. The flour, we have trucks with flour waiting at the border. The Israelis have indicated that.
Oh, and maybe they can shoot the people as they try to get the flour, as happened before.
Yes. Yeah.
The flour massacre.
They're going to begin to allow a lot more of these trucks to get in, but it is complicated. It is logistically complicated, and the conditions on the ground are dangerous. There are still many exploded shells all over the place. So we have to be mindful of that. But that said, we do not want to see a humanitarian crisis, and we will not allow it to occur on President Trump's watch.
Well, it's a little late because there is a humanitarian crisis, and it has been occurring on President Trump's watch.
I mean, imagine someone saying, like, during the Nazi Holocaust, like, we don't want to see a Holocaust happen, and this will not be happening on our watch. I mean, can he look at I mean, he's been to Gaza, actually. He visited Gaza, actually, during one of his trips, so he saw it for himself. It's the world's worst humanitarian crisis. 2 million people who are trapped in a defenseless death camp, being bombarded, being denied food, being starved. That's a humanitarian crisis. It's just how you can go on television. And of course, how does the Jonathan Karl not correct him and say, what are you talking about?
Right.
You're talking about a humanitarian crisis as if it's a prospect
right
happening.
Now.
It's been happening for well over a year.
Yeah. It really is, I mean, unreal how much, and this is why we do the show, right? But it is unreal how complicit the media is. I mean, sometimes I feel like you almost forget what the media could be doing. I mean, that's why we showed that Ayman clip, right? Where he did a great summary of what was happening, because reminder that the media could actually be telling the truth and be responsible and holding people's feet to the fire. And it really just helps our politicians do what they're doing when they know that they won't be asked about it. Although, to be fair, I don't think that would really affect the Trump administration, but at least they'd be documenting the truth.
All right. You know, we have so many offensive clips today that we're not going to get to all of them. So just what we're giving you is just a small sample of the deceit and sadism that is being broadcast to U.S. audiences, and it's just it's very jarring. We'll do what we can. So let's go to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. He sort of takes a back seat to Steve Witkoff, who is responsible for so many different portfolios, not just Gaza, Israel, but also Iran and Russia, Ukraine. So Marco Rubio, I don't know what he exactly does with his time, but he's very happy, of course, with Israel's mass murder campaign in Gaza, and here he is being asked about it.
Says he wants to end wars, but Israel's prime minister has said he is expanding this ground operation inside of Gaza. The IDF.
Hold on, let's make sure that we start these clips from the beginning, because sometimes there's something very important at the beginning. So listen to this, ready?
The president says he wants to end wars, but Israel's prime minister has said he is expanding this ground operation inside of Gaza. The IDF says is to seize strategic areas. Does the U.S.
So, by the way, that's just a reminder that, and Aaron and I talked about this with our excellent guest, Sana Said, last week. But, don't be fooled. And I can even be fooled by this sometimes. I'm going to cop to that. Don't be fooled by Trump's anti-war rhetoric, because he does like to pay lip service to that. And at the same time, as we're going to see, he likes to enable, she's calling a war, but I would say genocide. I didn't think that he was going to be anti-war. I thought he would do some stuff to piss off Israel more than he did. But anyway.
U.S. fully support expanding this war. The U.S. fully support expanding this war.
We support a future for the people of Gaza that is free of Hamas and full of opportunity. That's what we support. We are actively engaged in trying to figure out if there is a way to get more hostages out.
The question was, do you support Israel expanding the war? It should not be called a war. It's a mass murder campaign. There's no war when there's only one army and no air defenses or tanks on the other side. Gaza is just defenseless. That's why tens of thousands of people have been killed and the whole territory has been bombed to rubble. But the question is, do you support Israel expanding this campaign? And he doesn't answer the question. He just says we support a future without Hamas. So that means a future without Palestinians in Gaza, because that's Israel's actual goal, is to make Gaza unlivable so that, most of the residents of Gaza leave and they continue the ethnic cleansing campaign that has started in 1948. So that's what he's saying he's supporting, is ethnic cleansing.
And also, it's important to remind people that that Hamas has said they'll cede control.
Yeah, the issue for them is they don't want to lay down their weapons.
Yeah.
And
right, but they're saying, I guess they're saying a world without Hamas. But if they really cared about, if that was really important to just not have Hamas in control, that would be significant.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. Hamas has said they don't want to continue controlling the Gaza Strip, so they'd be open to a new government. But that's not enough for Israel and the U.S. because they would, again, Netanyahu's goal is to make Gaza unlivable, commit ethnic cleansing, and that job is not finished yet.
Yeah, and also imagine demanding that they totally disarm when Israel is massacring so many people. I mean, it's just like, how could you possibly ask for that? The hypocrisy is just so rank.
Through some ceasefire type mechanism. We're not going to do anything to undermine Israel and its security, but by the same token, if there is a possibility here to find a way forward that frees more hostages, including those who are alive, but also the bodies to their relatives, and potentially bring about an end to this war in a way that puts the people of Gaza on a pathway of peace and prosperity and being free of Hamas, we're going to explore that.
Yeah, everything's all about a pathway, which is it's a fancy way of saying we're going to do absolutely nothing for the people of God. We're going to let them die. We'll put them on a pathway, so maybe one day they might have some peace and security. It means absolutely nothing. That pathway is such a common term. It's a way to avoid actually giving them anything, any minimal rights to freedom, to life, to self-determination. It's all about a pathway going in some direction that we're never going to actually define.
Yeah. And by the way, we are at over 1,300 viewers, and we have 553 likes. Unacceptable. Get those likes up there. You are liking, of course, this show. You are disliking mainstream media. So don't let those guys win. You let them win every time you don't like.
Yeah. But I want to say something, because I want to be faithful to and true to the friends I have who are still in Gaza. In my small sample size, they would love it if Hamas surrendered and stopped all this and let all the remaining captives go, because they're living through hell and they didn't sign up for this. They didn't. And what is it ultimately achieving? It's achieving the continued obliteration of Gaza. And people are, after a year and a half of this, understandably, want it to stop, and unfortunately, Israel is so sadistic that it still is on this killing spree just to show the Palestinians that you cannot dare resist us. You can't resist our occupation. And if you do, we're going to inflict the world's worst crisis on you, make Gaza the worst place on earth. And that's what they're currently doing. But people in Gaza have to going through it, just want it to stop in any way that it can, at least the ones that I speak to.
But do you think Israel would stop after that happened?
That's a great question. Probably not. But I'm just saying is
you're saying what your friends have been saying.
Yeah. I mean, imagine the position you're in living through that. Right. Okay. Let's hear more from Marco Rubio because he's going to respond to a claim made about the captives, the hostages that are still in Gaza, and how little Israel cares about them.
Asking Israel to slow down this military push. And the Qatari prime minister told Fox News that there was a deal being put together for all hostages or many hostages to be released after Idan Alexander, that American-Israeli, was released recently. But then the Israeli military bombed a hospital, killing 70 civilians, and everything went sideways.
No, the way I would characterize it is that this war could end immediately, and Israel's made that clear. It could end immediately if Hamas surrenders and gives up their weapons and demilitarizes and releases all the hostages, including the deceased ones. They did that, this conflict would end. That's been true from the very beginning. It's been true for months now.
So, I hadn't heard that allegation, but so the Qatari prime minister is saying that there was a deal to release all the remaining captives, and then Israel chose to bomb one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza, the Indonesian hospital, and that's what killed the deal. So that speaks to your point, Katie, that like no matter what, Israel will continue attacking. But then on the other hand, that could be an argument that they want to undermine any possible freedom of the hostages, of the captives, because they want a pretext to continue bombing. So
right
when they certainly got it here by attacking a hospital and killing people as they tried to flee.
Because their bloodlust is much larger than their desire to save the lives of hostages. Like Israel's whole shtick is that they are a safe haven for Jews and that they do anything and everything to protect Jews and prevent another Holocaust. And what do we see here? I mean, and I say this to anyone who happens to be watching who still thinks that Israel is good for the Jews. And of course, the main problem with Israel, overwhelming problem, is that they are massacring and genociding Palestinians. But it's just worth remembering that, again, their desire to kill Palestinians is much larger than their desire to save the lives of Jews. And in fact, they are fine with having Jews die if it helps them kill more Palestinians.
Okay, let's move on to Adam Boehler. We didn't have him on. We featured him about a month or two ago. Back in March, he held some extensive talks with Hamas officials in Doha, and they got somewhere. They basically reached or almost reached a deal to free Idan Alexander, who was recently ultimately freed. But then Israel got word of that and sabotaged it. They were through leaks, and Adam Boehler got basically pulled back from this beat of being a hostage envoy because he made the mistake of going on CNN and telling Jake Tapper that, I know Israel's upset that I'm talking to Hamas, but sorry, like, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. And we have our own interests to look out for. And you can't say that in Washington because being Washington, you actually have to be a de facto agent of Israel. So Adam Boehler's back. And now I think he's learned his lesson because he's no longer talking about defying Israel in any way. And in fact, he's talking about coordinating with Israel on pretty much every issue of importance in the Middle East, despite claims recently that Trump and Netanyahu are in conflict. So here's Adam Boehler.
Start here. The president has got some surprising supporters of some of the things that he got done. The trip, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's how Axios summed up some of the criticism. Says Trump has met with the leader the U.S. officially considers a terrorist, announced he'll lift all sanctions on Syria, and cut a truth with the Houthis, plus a hostage deal with Hamas, both of which excluded Israel. So let's start with Syria's leader at this point. He remains on the U.S. terror list, in large part because of past associations with al-Qaeda and other things. Israel has concerns about him, as do many others. So why do we trust him? Should we now?
Well, I think we've looked over the past number of months since he's moved in, and I think there is some reason, and that's why the president is withholding sanctions. Keep in mind, those sanctions were put on a country led by a different individual. And so continuing something where you have a new leader, you've got to refresh and look at it. The other thing I'll say.
Yeah, that's right. Before Syria was led by Bashar al-Assad, the U.S. wanted to overthrow him, not because he was repressive and an authoritarian, because of torture. That was no reason. The reason was because he was part of the Axis of Resistance, which deterred Israeli-U.S. hegemony. So the U.S. spent billions of dollars in a dirty war, imposed murderous sanctions that hurt the Syrian people. And now that he's gone and replaced by the former leader of al-Qaeda in Syria, now the sanctions can be lifted.
Right.
And as we talked about last week, it's great the sanctions are being lifted, but they never should have been imposed in the first place, because what right do we have to further impoverish suffering people and destroy their economy even more simply because we want to overthrow their government, largely in the service of Israeli interests as well? And now that, it's like he talks about now has a new leader, it's time for a fresh start. Yeah, I mean, sure, but the new leader also, if we're being honest, is a former leader of al-Qaeda in Syria. And we have to overlook that, because we don't care about terrorism, al-Qaeda. We just care about overthrowing people who deter U.S.-Israeli hegemony. So mission accomplished. Let's shake hands with the former al-Qaeda guy and have a fresh start.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's good that there are not sanctions, but it is telling that when they suspend them is when al-Qaeda buddy is in power.
Who Trump, as we talked about last week on the Thursday Throwdown, is Trump praised as a very attractive young guy.
Oh yeah, seriously, yeah. He likes the makeover.
From an Israel perspective, is just because the president isn't in person with Netanyahu doesn't mean there's not massive coordination. So the Israelis knew about the meeting in Syria. The Israelis knew they're an ally of us. So we're going back and forth all the time, even if the president is not in person with Netanyahu at the moment.
Okay. So
and that's so funny. He goes from saying and getting like sort of pulled back by Trump for saying on TV, we're not an agent of Israel. He comes back like 2 months later, whatever, and says, don't worry, everyone, we're coordinating with Israel. They're totally read in. They knew about our meeting with the al-Qaeda guy. They're fine with it. Of course they are, because, by the way, Israel was a part of the coalition that took part in the dirty war. And that's why Netanyahu, after Assad was overthrown, said we deserve credit for this. And he was right about that, because, the U.S., because Israel and the U.S. both helped arm the insurgency that the former al-Qaeda leader was the leader of, and is now the leader of Syria. So that's Adam Boehler coming.
I wonder,
for saying that we're not an agent of Israel.
Yeah, and I wonder, because Trump is, I think, trying to confuse people, and didn't visit Israel, even though obviously, as we just said, they're saying that doesn't mean that there's any rift between them. I wonder if it's also because they wanted Boehler back on the stage, because that also suggests, oh, look, we have this guy who's been critical of Israel before. Just an idea.
Yeah.
As Trump attempts to trick people. Yeah.
Let's skip a little bit ahead. Let's go to Senator Chris Van Hollen, who's been decent on Gaza. He's a Democrat. He's been I shouldn't say decent blankly, but relatively decent inside the Senate in terms of calling out.
Right. In terms of rhetoric.
Right. He did vote still for weaponry to Israel, which is kind of like, how do you vote for weaponry to a country when you're calling out its flagrant crimes, which he has done. But anyway, that's Washington for you. So here is Chris Van Hollen with his comments on the U.S. role in Gaza.
Showed some reporting from our colleague Deborah Patta with incredible pictures from our shooter inside of Gaza, Marwan. It's hard to look at pictures of children in that level of starvation. You have said the Israeli government is starving civilians and the U.S. is complicit in the gross violation of international law. The UN's begging to go in. The Israeli government says they don't want to work with the UN here. They want to work with this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that's just being set up. What do you know about this? Should there be U.S. support for it?
So, Margaret, you're right. It's very hard to look at those pictures. And the United States has been complicit. President Trump was in the region and really did nothing, said virtually nothing about what's happening in Gaza, which is on fire. We're in 77th day of a full blockade. 2 million Palestinians are starving. This is collective punishment that is clearly illegal under international law. And this other idea that's been cooked up either by the Israelis or by the Trump administration is clearly not fit for purpose when it comes to trying to address this burgeoning famine. And all it will do is further allow food to be used as a weapon of war. So I hope the United States will back off this plan. None of the credible international organizations have said that they will participate because it violates international norms and how it's structured. And so I hope the United States will back off and immediately call today to allow the trucks right now that have food to be able to come provide food to starving people. These are provided by international aid organizations.
Is there anything that the United States can do in terms of leverage? You've been bipartisan in your criticism. You said that what happened in Gaza is a black stain on Joe Biden's legacy as president. You are criticizing the current administration for not doing more here. What leverage is there? I mean, is what you're saying falling on any ears that want to listen?
Well, I've had conversations with some people in the Trump administration and made clear that they need to do more. One of the very obvious things they could do is President Trump today could call upon the Netanyahu government to let aid in. I mean, the president acknowledged there are people starving in Gaza the other day. He said so. But why hasn't he called on, Netanyahu to let the aid in? Let's just start with that.
Not bad. I mean, there's obviously a lot more. You could cut off the weaponry that sustains the Israeli mass murder campaign. And I guess some people like Chris are still uncomfortable explicitly calling for that. Although his votes, I think he recently voted for Bernie's bill to block U.S. weaponry. So that's some progress on his part. But look, this is the best you can basically get inside the Senate when it comes to opposition to the genocide. It's still, it's pretty milquetoast.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, I guess it's better than nothing. But
bar so low, yeah.
Yeah. But Van Hollen mentioned Trump's visit to the Middle East. He went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and all those countries, announced these fancy new deals with Trump to invest in the U.S. And Qatar gave Trump a $400 million jet. And Max Blumenthal made a very good point about, after Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream interrupted a congressional hearing where RFK Jr., who's a hardcore supporter of Israel, was testifying, Ben Cohen interrupted the hearing and talked about the U.S. complicity in genocide. And so this is what Max Blumenthal said. He said, Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's did more to challenge the Trump administration's support of the Gaza Holocaust than all of the Gulf monarchies combined this week. And that's right. I mean, they could have used this moment of Trump visiting the region to say, we're not going to make deals with you. We're not going to even give you a lavish welcome until you stop the genocide in Gaza. But they didn't. Even though hospitals that they fund in Gaza are being blown up, one of the hospitals that Qatar funds was just attacked in Gaza, the hospital for amputees. So that's the state of some of the regional actors just totally bowing to Trump and not doing anything for Palestine. Can
you just imagine the hospital for amputees, that exists is so atrocious. And then that was blown up is so atrocious. Hospital for amputees.
Yeah. Well, Katie, let's turn to a cause that's I know it's close to your heart, which is the plight of white Afrikaner refugees to the U.S., upper class, as I understand, that have come at the invitation of the Trump administration to protect white people from South Africa.
Yes, it's so incredibly important, and it's good. It's important to point out that while we are not calling out genocide in the United States, the U.S. While the United States is not calling out the genocide in Gaza, a genocide that has been documented by several human rights organizations and figures and genocide experts. Maybe actually, Aaron, I just realized the reason that the U.S. can't call out the genocide in Gaza is because they're so focused on the real genocide happening in South Africa to white farmers. So let's take a listen to Marco Rubio.
The administration has prioritized bringing some white South Africans, Afrikaners, to the United States despite the increased restrictions on refugees. President Trump claims there's a genocide underway in South Africa. That's a legal determination. The State Department would make it. Are you trying to determine that now?
I will determine that these people are having their properties taken from them. They can call it whatever they want, but these are people that on the basis of their race are having their properties taken away from them and their lives being threatened and in some cases killed. These are people that applied and made these claims in their applications and seek to come to the United States in search of refuge. We've often been lectured by people all over the place about how the United States needs to continue to be a beacon for those who are oppressed abroad. Well, here's an example where we're doing that. So I don't understand why people are criticizing it. I think people should be celebrating it, and I think people should be supporting it.
Well,
if in fact,
is there evidence of a
as many
genocide
claim,
that you
they
have?
are in favor. I think there's evidence absolutely that people have been murdered, that people have been forcibly removed from their properties, both by the government and
Wait, just a question. If the definition of genocide for Rubio is being murdered and having their property taken, I wonder where else that's happening and actually happening on a massive scale.
in some cases because of a law they passed, but also because of independent groups encouraged by political parties inside of South Africa. So listen, to move here from half a world away and leave behind the only homeland you've ever known, that's not something people do lightly. These people are doing it for a reason. So we welcome them to the United States, and I think there may be more coming soon.
Well, you know what's interesting, Aaron, is it's really moving that the United States is calling this a genocide, because not one single party in South Africa, not even that of the Afrikaners, have said that there's a genocide. And if anyone's going to say that, that would be there. Yeah.
You know, I wonder sometimes if when Marco Rubio and Trump, when they talk together, if they're laughing because what they're saying is so ridiculous. Like, they're funding and arming a genocide in Gaza while publicly crying about a fake genocide of white people in South Africa. They're talking about how much they love free speech, and they're lecturing Europe about free speech while they're literally detaining and kidnapping and deporting people for writing op-eds, protesting mass murder by Israel in Gaza. It's like they're constantly just doing a bit, and they keep heightening it. Like, this is like the next level now. They're going to like let in privileged white Afrikaners and complain about a genocide while they're actively supporting a genocide of Palestinians inside of Gaza. And I haven't looked into what's happening in South Africa, but what I do know is that, I mean, one of the problems with the end of the apartheid system is that, like, yes, formally apartheid was abolished, but the economic inequality remained exactly the same. So the economic power remained concentrated in the whites. So apartheid continued under the guise of, at least ending racial-based supremacy, but in terms of like racial-based economic supremacy, that apartheid system has prevailed. And if there's steps to, I suspect what's happening is there's maybe sometimes some steps to address that, and that's what Marco Rubio and Donald Trump are so offended by, daring to try to like make the legacy of apartheid to sort of to undo that even more. They can't do that.
You know, the victim of genocide, the victim of murder has been, I guess, the real victim is the official apartheid system.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. It's just, it's such a joke. I mean, you can't make it up. And there's no comparison. There's been murders, but people get murdered in South Africa. There's a fairly high murder rate. But comparing it to the attempt to exterminate an entire people is just such a joke.
Let's go back to Steve Witkoff. He is, again, a good friend of Trump's. He's a real estate guy, and Trump has given him like multiple extremely consequential portfolios: Israel, Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, and also Iran. Why not, right? Usually in these negotiations, usually in these talks, you have like a lot different teams, like a lot of experts, but it's basically Steve Witkoff flying from city to city. No wonder the world's on fire, because how can you possibly solve anything just with like when he doesn't even have really an official title. He's not like an ambassador or he's just like an envoy for whatever, for the Middle East. Anyway, so he's now in charge of Iran negotiations. And after initially saying that the U.S. would let Iran enrich uranium, which Iran has the right to do under international treaties, and which the Iran nuclear deal allowed Iran to do, now the Trump administration is changing its tune and saying, sorry, no enrichment at all whatsoever. So here's Steve Witkoff laying that out.
The president has been very clear. He wants to solve this conflict diplomatically and with dialogue. And he's given all the signals. He's directly sent letters to the supreme leader. I have been dispatched to deliver that message as well, and I've delivered it. But on the other hand, we have one very, very clear red line, and that is enrichment. We cannot allow even 1% of an enrichment capability. We've delivered a proposal to the Iranians that we think addresses some of this without disrespecting them. And so That's important. We want to get to a solution here, and we think that we will be able to. But everything begins from our standpoint, John, with a deal that does not include enrichment. We cannot have that, because enrichment enables weaponization, and we will not allow a bomb to get here.
Well, the whole point of the deal is for Iran to agree to never build a bomb. But what Iran has said, a red line for Iran, is they want the right to enrichment because they have that right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And Iran developed its enrichment program and doesn't want to give it up because they have the right to it under the treaties that they signed. So basically, the Trump administration is putting forward as its own red line a demand that Iran has always said for a long time is its red line. So basically, the Trump administration in taking this stance is basically dooming these talks to fail. And like maybe this is some negotiating tactic or something to make this demand so publicly. But if that's the case, like why would you do it in public? Because it makes it that much harder to reach an agreement, because Iran's going to dig in now and get more defensive rather than trying to work this out behind the scenes. So for all the talk, and I, honestly, of all the people in the Trump administration, I thought that this guy was at least like, relatively speaking, I'm not talking about like objectively, but relatively speaking, somewhat fair-minded and somewhat like rational. He's now adopting the Netanyahu line. And if that's really what they're going to stick to, then we're not going to have an agreement. And if we're not going to have agreement, that means we're probably going to have a war, which Trump keeps threatening. So right. We can look forward to that possibility.
Yeah, anti-war Trump, guys.
Okay, we can skip ahead to so let's go back to Marco Rubio, because meanwhile also we have the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, which Trump is talking about ending, and there were some meetings in Istanbul last week between Ukrainian and Russian officials. It lasted about 2 hours. Zelensky made a big show of like saying that unless Putin shows up in these talks, then the Russians are not serious, and like there's no point in talking to them because Putin didn't come. Well, like what's funny about that is Putin sent the exact same people that he sent the last time there were peace talks between Ukraine and Russia 3 years ago, also in Istanbul. And that's when they reached an agreement, or almost reached an agreement, until the US and UK intervened and told him not to take it. So meanwhile, Zelensky has also signed a decree saying that he can't negotiate with Russia as long as Putin is power. Now he's saying I'll only negotiate with Russia if Putin shows up in Istanbul. But anyway, there were some talks. They lasted 2 hours. They agreed on a prisoner exchange. And we'll see from there. Russia is sticking to its maximalist demands. And the U.S. is just saying, hey, this has got to end. But it doesn't seem like they've moved the needle in either direction. I think ultimately Trump just doesn't know what he wants to do. So he's just like letting this continue to play out as things are. So
that's that strategic unpredictability that Hexeth praised. Yeah.
So here's Marco Rubio on that.
Said repeatedly, it's just a matter of days, though, in terms of the waning patience that the U.S. has for this diplomacy to succeed. So are they just tapping you along, as President Trump has said? Are they just seeking to continue to talk to buy time?
Are they tapping us along? Well, that's what we're trying to find out. We'll find out pretty soon. They met yesterday or the day before in Turkey. From that, they agreed they're going to exchange paper on ideas to get to a ceasefire. If those papers have ideas on them that are realistic and rational, then I think we know we've made progress. If those papers, on the other hand, have requirements in them that we know are unrealistic, then we'll have a different assessment. On the one hand, we're trying to achieve peace and end a very bloody, costly, and destructive war. So there's some element of patience that is required. On the other hand, we don't have time to waste. So we don't want to be involved in this process of just endless talks. There has to be some progress, some movement forward. Ultimately, one of the things that could help break this logjam, perhaps the only thing that can, is a direct conversation between President Trump and Vladimir Putin.
And that's happening today as we're broadcasting. There's going to be a Trump-Putin phone call. But look, unless Trump makes up his mind what he wants to do, I just don't see where any progress is going to be made. And ultimately, this will continue to be decided on the battlefield where Russia has the advantage. So, and I don't see how this is in Ukraine's interest, because especially if Trump doesn't come through with more U.S. weaponry, which is what kept Ukraine going, they're going to run out of weapons eventually in possibly months. So if I were Ukraine, I'd make a deal now, and it's going to be painful. It's going to be a lot worse than the one they had on the table 3 years ago in Istanbul that they walked away from, which I think was a disaster. I think the U.S., on top of refusing to back up Zelensky, convinced him that he could win, which obviously hasn't happened. But look, it's just and Russia's getting more sort of maximalist and expansionist because now they're arrogant and they've lost a lot of people and now they want more. They're demanding even more Ukrainian territory and they'll take it by force unless Ukraine gives it up now. So it's bleak, and we're possibly looking at this conflict, this war, dragging on for even longer rather than the peace that Trump promised when he came in.
Yeah. It's just so it's so dystopian, the entire thing.
Well, for a contrary point of view, let's hear from Bridget Brink. She recently resigned as U.S. ambassador to Ukraine because she doesn't like the fact that we're basically talking about a peace deal with Russia and putting pressure on Ukraine. She says we should be doing something. She says we should be doing what Joe Biden did, which is prolong the war, send weapons, impose new sanctions, and see how it plays out. As if we haven't done that already for more than 3 years. But here's Bridget. Here's Bridget Brink.
That President Trump and President Putin have plans to speak on Monday. When you were still in Kyiv, President Zelensky called out the U.S. Embassy for what he called a disappointingly weak reaction from America following a missile attack that killed small children. He said, you must not be afraid to call things by their names. And the U.S. is afraid to even say the word Russian when speaking about the missile that murdered children. Do you feel American officials are being censored from saying things frankly and honestly?
I mean, our job as diplomats is to reflect and represent the policy of the president and the administration. That's our job. That's what we do as professionals. And having worked for 5 different...
It's interesting that the job description for diplomats does not include diplomacy.
No, definitely not. No, like to be a diplomat, an American diplomat in Ukraine for the last more than 10 years means backing a coup, which is what Victoria Nuland did. She was a top State Department official. She was heavily involved in backing the coup that began this whole thing, and then undermining subsequent peace opportunities like the Minsk Accords. That's what U.S. diplomats in Ukraine are used to doing, not actually diplomacy.
Presidents that requires reflecting that policy that's made constitutionally by the president. So to me, the real question is, how are we going to help to end this war in a way that's in the interest of the United States? And to do that, it can't be peace at any price. It has to be a peace that does things that advance our own interests. And those are really simple. It's how to keep Ukraine free, how to deter Russia, and how to send the right signal to China. And this is what we should be doing. And
I'm just imagining like a signing ceremony between Putin and Zelensky. Finally, they've reached peace. And then all of a sudden, a U.S. diplomat phones in. Wait a second. Hold on. Did we make sure that the message, the peace treaty, sends the right message to China? It's very, very important, everybody. Hold on. Everyone stop. Everyone stop. Put down the pens. We got to proofread this to make sure that China is getting the right message in a Russia-Ukraine peace document, which it speaks to how this war is not about Ukraine.
Exactly.
It's about advancing U.S. hegemony, so to weaken adversaries like Russia and China as well. China somehow has to learn something from a war going on in Ukraine.
At least they're saying it out loud.
While still claiming to care about Ukraine. What does China have to do with Ukraine? And why should someone from Ukraine die to send a message to China?
Well, Aaron, if you don't get that, there's no reaching you because it's just so obvious and so important.
Yes. But we can move on now to domestic matters. Joe Biden just announced he has a serious form of prostate cancer. And this comes just as a book is coming out of how basically Democratic Party elites covered up Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And this happened to be announced, his cancer announcement happened to be announced just as his book is coming out. So anyway, Jim Clyburn is among the Democratic Party.
And that's, I think, important, by the way, to I mean, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and obviously I'm sure the cancer is real, but it is very useful timing, I'll just say, for Biden to come out about a very aggressive form of prostate cancer right when this book that's kind of exposing him as totally ill-equipped and unprepared to run for president. and exposing the kind of cover up is coming out.
The speculation that's out there, and of course, we're not advancing this theory because we have no way of knowing, but this is what people are speculating, that this cancer diagnosis actually was made earlier and that they've kept it secret to blunt the impact of the book, or because they didn't want to admit it when Joe Biden was campaigning. Again, no evidence for that, but people are so mistrustful now of the Democratic Party elites and Joe Biden that people understandably raise questions. And when I think of Joe Biden and cancer, I think about the fact that he supported an Israeli mass murder campaign that destroyed hospitals in Gaza, including ones that treated people for cancer. So this is a headline from November of 2023. Gaza's only cancer hospital goes out of service. That's back then. And
I wonder why it went out of service.
Yeah. And this is a more recent headline. Gaza's last hospital for 10,000 cancer patients shuts down due to repeated Israeli strikes, and that was Israel's recent attacks on the European hospital. So, how many cancer patients has Joe Biden helped make even more sick and even help kill because of his support for Israeli mass murder? That's what I think of when I think about Joe Biden and cancer. Yeah,
well, I think about that, and I also think about his saying that he would veto Medicare for all.
Yeah, that's right. But he was so proud of that too. He didn't even hesitate to say he would veto it. Okay, so here's Jim Clyburn.
I still can't get over the way the headlines cover Israel bombing cancer hospitals. That they have to shut down.
Yeah, sorry, we have to close up shop, but it's tough times around here for this cancer hospital. We're a low budget operation. We couldn't make it. It didn't help that we were being bombarded and under siege. Anyway, okay, so Jim Clyburn, Democratic Congress member of South Carolina, he was a major Biden booster.
Oh yeah.
They actually, one of the things that this new book about Joe Biden's decline in the cover-up reveals was that they actually made sure to hold the South Carolina primary first to give Joe Biden a boost, right? Like in the primary. So they actually, once again, as they did with Hillary Clinton and Bernie, they once again rigged the primary to give Biden the advantage by holding a state that they knew he would win early. And Jim Clyburn was all over that. And Jim Clyburn was
also an opponent of Medicare for all, by the way. Clyburn.
Shocker.
And so big recipient of Big Pharma donations.
Shocker. Total shocker. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that he they took part in sabotaging Bernie Sanders. So Jim Clyburn, after being a big Biden booster, now he's being asked by Jake Tapper, one of the co-authors of this new book, who, by the way, also covered up for Biden, calling it the Clinton, but that's another story.
Do you think that Joe Biden really would have been able to perform as president all the way through January? Do you think that Joe Biden really would have been able to perform as president all the way through January 2029 when he would be 86?
Yes, I thought that back then. I still think that, but I don't know that. When people ask me, did I know this or did I know the other? And the fact of the matter is, no, I didn't. And you make my point here. So it's not all about age.
I love that. I still think it, but I don't know it.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. Well, then you can basically never be wrong.
Right.
If you still think something that's demonstrably false, but you can say, well, I don't know for sure. Okay, great. So don't take a position on anything, and just don't ever be accountable for anything you've ever advocated, because you think it, you just don't know it. All right.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like he's in a philosophy class or something.
Yeah.
Can we ever know? Can we ever really know? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen people develop Alzheimer's when they're in their 30s and 40s.
Okay, he should write a paper about that, because that's pretty rare.
Alzheimer's in your 30s and 40s by Congressmember Jim Clyburn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, what is the relevance of this? So you're saying that because someone else may have developed Alzheimer's in the 30s and 40s, that it's okay to cover up for Joe Biden's cognitive decline in his 80s? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
So it's not about age. It's about the ability to do the job. And I never saw anything that allowed me to think that Joe Biden was not able to do the job. Just that simple.
So what I'm hearing from Jim Clyburn is age ain't nothing but a number. That's the message I'm hearing from Jim Clyburn, which is
Right, exactly.
a song by Aaliyah, written by R. Kelly. So it's a little,
yeah,
it's a little
which is
crude,
really,
but
I mean, no wonder
that's
he
the
said
argument.
that.
But that's the argument. Age ain't nothing but a number.
Right.
And,
I was thinking the same thing, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to Van Jones.
Okay. Yeah. You better
Van
like the stream because we're going overtime, guys. Yeah. And we can skip to just the Van Jones part. We don't have to hear the Axelrod part.
Okay. So, yeah. So, Wilson, please skip to where
Van I can
Jones
help find it.
Let's skip over Dave Axelrod, the Axe.
Continue.
Book is extraordinary. First, this book is.
Hold on, this is amazing. By the way, it's so great that Jake Tapper has this show because he's hawking his book so hard. And in fact, in another clip, he's like, "You won't believe what we found." He does like a 5-minute promo for his own book. Okay,
Van, I remember how emotional you were in the immediate moments after the June 20th.
Jake, can we tone down the? He just sounds so Van. He just sounds he's so aggressively obnoxious. I have a bias against Jake Tapper because of his, support for Israeli mass murder and whitewashing of it. So I'm a little triggered when he talks. But come on, Jake, let's speak with more. I don't know. Let's just tone it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Van.
You're hurting Aaron's ears. Yeah.
27th, 2024 debate because of what you saw.
That's more hushed, right? He starts, Van,
yeah.
But then he goes,
it's almost like he's hearing you right now in real time.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're in dialogue.
Tap it down, says Danny. Yes. Good one.
On the stage. And with all this new reporting coming out, and I should disclose that I gave both of you copies of the book so you would have a little bit more information.
So you would pimp it out for me.
Yeah, I should disclose that the book I've just authored is on sale now by Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I did give them copies to help promote the book, which I'm doing right now. And again, I'm not going to mention that I covered up the very cognitive decline that I now claim I'm exposing.
Well, Aaron, as we said last week, I don't remember if it was in Thursday Throwdown or the regular show, but it is in some ways very appropriate for Tapper to write a book about a conspiracy because he participated in it. So he is quite the expert. A cover-up, yeah.
Do you feel like you were duped, Van? How do you feel?
First.
Oh, and by the way, shout out to Van for wearing a hostage pin. Nothing for Palestinians, but
this book is extraordinary.
Van Jones, a former revolutionary activist, prison abolitionist, and
who literally has since compared wearing a keffiyeh in a Jewish neighborhood to showing up in Harlem with a Confederate flag.
Well, it just shows you, everybody, if you're looking for inspiration, you can always reinvent yourself. You can go from being a revolutionary activist to wearing an Israeli pin and basically being a tool of the Israel lobby.
Right.
And going on CNN. And, that's Van Jones. Everybody.
Well, I should disclose, as Jake Tapper just disclosed that he had sent them his copies of his book, I should disclose that I'm a little bit impartial because Van Jones in a green room when we were both getting ready to go on TV, not on the same segment, but each of us were going on TV, he did compliment my hair.
Okay, well, that's nice.
Which makes my criticism of him actually all the more brave. I'm going to pat myself on the back for being able to get over my vanity. And despite the fact that he has very good, impeccable taste when it comes to hair, I'm still going to call him out.
I saw Van Jones in a restaurant a few years ago, and I was looking at him very briefly. I was looking at him, and to the extent I was displaying any emotion, it was contempt, right? It was just contempt. But he didn't. He's either he missed it or he didn't want to see it. But he looked at me and gave me a nod back as if I was looking at him with fondness. And I wanted to say, Van, no, I'm not being. I'm not sending you positive vibes, but anyway, I decided.
You should have gone like this.
Yeah, I should.
And he would have known. Yeah.
Lost opportunity. Well, I'm sending the bad vibes out now.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are, left, right, or otherwise. Anybody who cares about this country and about just the dynamics of power, this is the emperor's new clothes playing itself out in real time. Everybody knew, but everyone was afraid to say, except for David Axelrod for 2 years, that something was wrong here. And so, I was shocked. I love Joe Biden. I don't like him. I love him. I got a chance to work with him when I was a part of the Obama administration and loved him more every day. I was shocked to see.
Yeah, they actually, I forgot about it. They actually threw Van Jones under the bus.
Oh, yeah.
After some conservatives complained about him because I forgot what he did.
I think he signed a letter asking for an investigation into 9/11. I believe that was what it was.
Oh, okay. Well,
don't quote me 100%, but I think it's true. Yeah.
Like,
but again,
he did something
I don't
like
know, Aaron, because I feel like James Clyburn. I think that, but I can't say I know.
Yes.
Yes.
See his condition when he came out, and so was the world. And that wasn't shocked. I love. But everyone was afraid to say, except for David Axelrod for 2 years, that something was wrong here. And so, I was shocked. I love Joe Biden. I don't like him. I love him. I got a chance to work with him when I was a part of the Obama administration and loved him more every day. I was shocked to see his condition when he came out, and so was the world. And that wasn't the first time he was in that condition. The book makes it very, very clear. There are people who knew and said nothing. And that is a crime against this republic. And I think the Democrats are going to pay for a long time for being a part of what is now being revealed to be a massive cover-up.
Okay, do you hear what he just said? He literally said that everybody knew it was the emperor's new clothes, right? Everybody knew and no one said anything. And seconds after saying that, he said he was shocked. So which is it? Did you know and not say anything, or were you shocked? You actually can't have those two things at the same time.
I think they're still figuring it out. And
they're still processing it.
My problem is they're only indignant because it made them look bad and it hurt their own electoral chances. Like it hurt their brand. And that's a no-no. Like, this is our brand. This is our Democratic Party brand. And Joe Biden hurt it. And that's bad. They don't care that Joe Biden in his declining state presided over two major geopolitical disasters, the proxy war in Ukraine and, even more criminal, Israel's mass murder campaign in Gaza, which he fueled with all his might because he's a career Israel apologist. And I think a bigot. Like, I think Joe Biden's a bigot. It's
100%.
pretty obvious the way he talks about Palestinians.
Oh, yeah.
He just has racist contempt for them. And there's no sanctimony or outrage about that. It's all about because Joe Biden hurt their brand. And so now it's time for some complaining about that.
Right. Yeah. And, it's Van calls it a crime against the Republic. Is it a crime against international humanitarian law to be funding and enabling a genocide, which he did?
Yes, he did. And
he's
there's
such a
no
stickler for criminality. Yeah.
And all these people are talking about accountability now, but they don't want any accountability for that, for the Biden support for genocide, because they were equally complicit in it. I just saw a great clip the other day. Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, he's got like a fancy position at Harvard Kennedy School.
Yeah.
Somebody in the audience stood up. Like, I think she either a student
She's
there,
an alum. She's an alum. Yeah. Ann Thompson.
And she said to the Harvard faculty member, or dean,
and
why are
Erica
you hiring this
Chenoweth,
guy? Yeah. Why are you hiring this guy? Like, what? He supported a genocide. And then Jake Sullivan gave this really disingenuous answer. Like, I hear your concern. I'm glad. Thanks for raising your concern, but we did the best we could. We worked hard. Anyway, all these people.
And the dean, Erica Chenoweth, was like, I'm not prepared to give because Chenoweth was basically asked why they hired him. And the response was, I'm not prepared to respond at this moment. But, she actually didn't call it genocide. I think she called it a horrible massacre. But Anne, anyway.
No, I get it, Katie. You want to be diligent with the facts, and I don't want to misrepresent anybody. But anyway, it was a great question, and thank you. I'm very grateful that Jake Sullivan was called out for what he did, and he deserved that, especially if he's going to go and try to lecture young people on how to be in government and how to conduct diplomacy, which he never did. He undermined it at every turn. Anyway, so many people to criticize and be mad at, and we try to give you a good sample size today on today's Monday morning.
And I wasn't trying to be a stickler. I mean, well, no, the reason I mentioned this, that she didn't call it genocide, is just because even that was kind of like, I mean, I think it's great that she said what she said, but they barely even had to face, that was even a softball for them, and they still couldn't say anything about it. Yeah. But I think we can save the rest of the clips because we've gone over. We'll have some great clips for you for Thursday Throwdown. But Aaron, you want to give people a preview, right, to your travels?
Yeah, I want to plug 2 events I'm doing. If you're in Europe and you happen to be in Oslo and London, I'm doing an event in Oslo on Wednesday, May 21st. Wilson, do we have the event page? If so, we could show it. If not, it's okay. Anyway, I'll be speaking Wednesday in Oslo, and we'll put links to for tickets in the show notes. And then on Saturday and Sunday, if you're in the UK, I'll be in Wales at a festival called How the Light Gets In. Other great people are going to be there, including Jeremy Corbyn and many others. And I'll be speaking there on various topics. Oh, look at that beautiful page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. That's where you get my tickets if you're in Oslo. We don't have to show that. I'm sorry. I think I put in the wrong link. But anyway, we'll put the links for both those. So Wednesday, May 21st in Oslo, and Saturday and Sunday in Wales.
Cool.
Hey on Rise is what it's called. That's May 24th and 25th. And if you're there, I'd love to meet you. Come to either of those events.
And I will be in Vienna June 13th to 15th. People should definitely check out this event. It is the first Jewish Anti-Zionist Congress. So that's in Vienna from June 13th to 15th. I'll be speaking there, and a bunch of great people will be there, including Chaim Brashit Zabner, who we've had on the show, who is the author of An Army Like No Other about the IDF. Also, Ghada Karmi, who is a brilliant woman, physician, Palestinian, who's written about the one-state solution. Yeah, it'll be a great event and a historic event.
Katie, I'm seeing a great opportunity for a classic Katie Halper acronym there, which is JAZZ, Jewish Anti-Zionist.
You're right. Jazz. Yeah, I like that. Jazz hands. Yeah.
Let's brand it.
Let's brand it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right. That's our show. Please support Useful Idiots at usefulidiotspodcast.com. We really appreciate you being here with us and supporting the show. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.